How's it going, guys? Christian Sandstrom here. I'm helping peak performers to avoid burnout and to access peak performance for real and sustainable through the realm of their biology. So I've worked with over 5,000 performers over the years, and I will share with you the tools and the foundations where I have found success and a tremendously good result, and at the same time also thriving for longevity and to decrease the risk of burnout so you can live and thrive for your family and your loved ones as well as yourself, and at the same time being successful. So one of the things that we are going to talk about today that is really important is the fact that common theme among peak performers is that they do not like to put off some silence or a break or some sort of pause. And I want to emphasize this as really important and a crucial part of a sustainable peak performing life. And I'm gonna explain you exactly why and for what reason this is really important for you. So you probably have been in a situation where you feel like you need to do a lot of work, you need to have a lot of meetings and do a lot of tasks, right? Because it feels good, it feels productive, and you're feeling that you are an effective person. That is true when it's about doing the things that matters to you the most, but it also can be a trap for manipulation and to be in a simulation of things where you're just running around and do a lot of errands and really don't focusing on the stuff that really takes you, your business, your sport, or what have you forward for real. And for that, you need to have deliberately designed pauses or silence. Because when you do that, you create a space between what you do and your strategy in what you're supposed to do. And that is also the realm of strategical thinking. So I've noticed over the years that a lot of my clients have been struggling with putting themselves into silence or doing nothing, and see that as pretty much an inhibitor of peak performance. When they do not have their phones, they do not have any sort of distraction or what they would call meaningful activities, and people asking them things, responsibilities to do as they see it. And that is a huge problem, because that is also many times creating some sort of perfectionism where they are trying to be perfect. So the perfectionism is a real thing, and it's many times a state where the input that they are receiving leads to an output that is connecting to their self-value or their how they see themselves into the world. So it becomes their identity, and because it does that, it's also driving forward the perfectionism way more as like a snowball effect. So you have to imagine your brain as you are sitting in a control room with a lot of screens and a lot of things going on there. And in the control room there's buttons to push at, and it's blinking devices all around, and you kind of instinctively and unconsciously thinking that they need to be on for life to happen. So when you shut things up or off, you really kind of feeling that something is off, and you feel that you need to put the screens on again. That is basically the brain. The problem with that, when it's about the brain metaphor, is that the brain is recovering and is also thinking in way more connections within the brain regions where they communicate in a broader realm when you are putting silence or when you are shutting off screens, so to speak. And that is the true secret to a lot of things going on in the silence. So for example, you have the capacity to regulate your emotional control better when you shut off the noise, so to speak, and you create some more deliberately designed silence or pauses in your day. You will also be able to handle your internal conflicts or your internal talks, problem solving, decisions, things like that. You can also kind of recognize if your identity like things or do not like things. If you made a right call or a wrong call. So it kind of works like a regulator of a feedback system. So that is why silence is so important for peak performers within any field, in business and in sports, in relationships, and whatever field or domain you want to peak perform in. On the other hand, is that if your brain is constantly depending on external input, and you kind of create your world around that, and you also do your decisions for that, and you have your emotions out of control upon that, then it pretty much means that you have lost your own control of yourself. So you are pretty much dependent, and you are more of a reactor than proactive, within the sense of regulating your red thread or what really matters to you, things like that. So you kind of get lost in the void there, which is really common for peak performers and high performing people to actually do that. Paradoxically enough, it's more prone if you are having a lot of responsibility or high expectations, which also drives a perfectionistic like behavior in you. So that is also very common. So I want to emphasize that to actually put in gaps or like a silent space is not about losing control, but it's more so about gaining control over what you need to do, when you need to do it, who's gonna do what, is it the right thing to do, things like that. And if you do that, you will be making a lot of better decisions. I see the results in the revenue in the businesses. I see the results in how the athletes perform, things like that, so they can focus on the process more so than the result. So it's really effectful, and it doesn't cost anything. You can do it whenever you want, and you can self-regulate in that sense. So that's really important for you to know that. So when you put yourself in a silent state or similar about that, you will experience some sort of symptomatic or almost like a rumination feeling, where you can feel a little bit stressed. You can feel that you do not have any control of your emotions or thoughts, which is okay. And that is many times the first stages of that you really need it. Just as when you're going to a gym and you're training a weak muscle, or we are making a call that we really don't want to make, things like that. But we need to make it because those things matters the most. That is purely that. When you have resistance, it basically means that it's something that you probably need and to be capable of, and increase your capacity in handling more silent moments, so to speak. It's also good if you are managing people, or if you're managing a team around you, or what have you, to have the capacity to listen and to actually embrace the silence more than you're speaking, because if you do so, you can understand people more, you can have better emotional intelligence, and you can have a better empathy, and all about communication, and to handle people around you, which is a great skill to actually have in your toolbox. So that is the first stages. You will feel a little bit, I wouldn't say panic, but you can feel resistance for sure. And that is obviously very individual. So one person can feel that it's really tough to be in a silent state, and another person can be really fine with that. But as I told you, if you know that resistance is coming and that it's a part of the process, it's going to get a lot easier for you to actually handle that. Obviously, you don't need to be, staring into a wall or meditate or something of that nature. You can be outside, you can go for a walk. You just have to, have your brain relax for a bit, to step out of the distraction zone, so to speak. So get rid of the noise, of the distractions. And to do so, we need to have a lot of low input things that you really cannot, think much about, like a tree or a river or what have you, small things that you really, the brain takes for granted because it's a part of the nature or the environment you're in. So it doesn't need to be a state of spirituality if you're not of that nature, of course. So with that said, after you have experienced some sort of stress response, and it will be more clearer, so your brain will go more into clarity and finally growth. So, and it's the same thing for every client that I've worked with, that like the brain is going chaotic at first, but after a while it settles down, and you're starting to see things way clearer and in a much better sense. So you can have a better and more powerful way in looking at things. You can zoom out better, and you can also activate your breathing slower, so your parasympathetic nervous system is activated, the calmer side of you, which is also decreasing blood pressure, and it is also increasing recovery and increasing cognitive recovery as well. So it's just really beneficial for all peak performers out there to actually embrace this and integrate this into your daily life. So imagine that you're doing this on a daily basis, and you do this day to day, becoming weeks, becoming months, becoming years. That will create an unstoppable strategical thinking brain where you actually can notice and you can be aware of really fast when things are going in the wrong direction, externally or internally. Another part is that we do also increase our interoception, which is basically our own need to feel ourselves and our bodies. So we can feel when tension is built up in the body. That is mostly possible to do when you are keeping the noise and the external distractions out, which means that your inner signals will increase. So you will also be able to recognize when you are stressed or when you're having a period, example in the day, where decision making is not a good idea, or having a tough debate or discussion with your boss or with your employees or with your trainer or coach, which is probably not a good idea if you are in a true or a too much stress state. So it's self-regulated state we want to have you in order for you to perform the best. We do this all the time with elite athletes, where they actually can refocus and do these small silence phases to actually settle the nervous system down so they can perform at their highest levels and all the way to the Olympics. And if they do that and they can perform and get into the flow state of peak performance, why shouldn't we do that as well in our businesses or relationships, or when we are raising our kids and whatever we got, right? So that's really important to understand that. So I want you to take away this with you, that if you cannot control to be with yourself when you have no distractions and it's silent, and you can do that deliberately, that is the same thing that you have lost yourselves and that you are not peak performance at your best, because your capacity is running on fumes, and that will always lead to worse decisions. You will have a worse health, you will have a cognitive decline, which means that your capacity to eat better, to train better, to think how you should balance your life, things of that sort, will also decline. Not because you do not know what to do, but you do not have the capacity to periodicize the things and to have these intervals from on and off in the brain, which is as important, if not more important, than actually the muscles that need the hypertrophy with increasing muscle mass, for example. So another thing is that when you doing a lot of stuff, so an athlete, for example, is training a lot of volume, for example, so a lot of exercises, and as a CO, or you might be in an expert position, you're a professional, or whatever you're working with or doing, you're doing a lot. And that is, for many peak performers that I meet that is struggling to taking the next step to the development, they most of the time have been creating an identity about doing stuff, right? So doing a lot of things. If you wanna be an athlete, you need to train more than most. If you wanna be a CEO, you need to work harder than everybody else. even if that is true to some extent, it's not really the most important thing, because if you can concentrate in doing less in amount of units for time and resources, but when you are doing things, you can have a way better, more productive deep work, and you can be focused and concentrated, so the quality of the work is better. That is peak performance. But that is also required that a part of your identity needs to really be trained in that doing nothing sometimes is doing everything. So that's a mind shift that is really mind-blowing for a lot of peak performers. They're not used to that, because we are pretty much trained in that you need to fight harder, to train more, and so on and so forth. If that was the case, I would see that all the athletes I meet, or all the CEOs that I'm working with, is outperforming the ones that is training or working the hardest, is outperforming the rest. But that is not the case. It's always the ones that is working the smartest, that is doing the right things in the right order in the right time, right? The same goes with athletes. The same goes with coaches. So just because you're doing more doesn't mean that you are being productive. And so if you are of the nature of perfectionism, that is the case, that you need to understand that a part of being perfect is to do nothing. So that is the trick here, to actually know what your brain and your body needs energy-wise in order for it to peak perform as good as possible. What the dopamine system or the serotonin system or whatever system we're talking about, what it needs in order for it to function correctly. And it needs to work in intervals. That's why we have circadian rhythms and a lot of other rhythms going on that is working in intervals. That is why muscle growth is a combination of stress and recovery. That is why cognition, peak performance, is a combination of stress response, which means deep work or doing things, learn things, but it's when the brain is deliberately silent and in rest where you actually can implement it, because the storage and the memory and the communication between neurons and neural networks in the brain is so much higher when you are actually just letting the brain flow and go with the, not doing anything for the moment, which is for the brain to actually process all the information and all the exercises or all the movement patterns or whatever you're learning and doing. And that is where the actual and the real peak performance lies. So I think this message is really important for you to understand. So that is everything for me, guys. So I really wish you an awesome day and peak perform out there. Thanks.